Assalamualaikum and good evening everyone. We are Group Pioneers and our project name is Industrial Relation in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, or previously is known as Ceylon, is a small island located at southern of India. It's a famous country because the tourism nature place for tourists. The special of Sri Lanka is the mountain at the center of Sri Lanka. The special name for the mountain of Central Highland is the heart of Sri Lanka. There are so many types of wildlife like tiger, leopard and elephant. The biodiversity in Sri Lanka is protected by government to maintain the balance of nature. The population in Sri Lanka in 2019 is 21.9 million people. The religion of Sri Lanka is divided by three. The first one is Buddhists with the percentage around 70%, followed by Hindus in 20%, and the lastly is 10% for Muslims. Next is the economy of Sri Lanka. The main sector or the growth driver in Sri Lanka is agriculture. The GDP performance in Sri Lanka is decreased for 5 years previously. In 2019, the GDP performance of Sri Lanka is 2.70%. Industrial relation in Sri Lanka has its own challenge. The employees and the employee in Sri Lanka is monitored by organization named the Employee Federation of Ceylon. It is established in 1929. The big challenger for this organization is for dealing with employees and social issues in Sri Lanka. The interesting about this organization is it is provide a wide range of network and its partner.
So I will present about industry relation system in Sri Lanka. First, the Board of Investment of Industrial Relation Department advises and assists the enterprises in order to maintain a cordial and harmonious industrial relation climate in Sri Lanka. Okay, second, the Department of Industrial Relation offer advisory services and guidance to the employers and employees in fostering closer labor with the management of cooperation at enterprise level on all aspects in the area of industrial relation. The Board of Investment policy statement on labor standard and employment relations would set out the basic terms and conditions of employment by operating both within and outside the export processing zone EPZ in Sri Lanka. Next, the Ministry and Department of Labour in Sri Lanka responsible for labour administration functions including the labour law enforcement and industrial relation. Next, I will present about employment laws in Sri Lanka. Employment laws in Sri Lanka was equally applicable to local employees and foreign employees, including the fixed-term basis, regular employment, and casual or seasonal. There are 5 categories of employment in Sri Lanka, which are consist of probationary employment, regular employment, casual employment, seasonal employment, and fixed-term employment. According to Thomson Reuters Practical Law 2020, all categories of employees are entitled to superannuation benefits under the Employees Provident Fund Act or number 15 of 1958 EPF Act and the Payment of Gratuity Act number 12 of 1983 Gratuity Act. Terms and conditions of employment governed by the Shop and Office Employees Regulation and Employment and Remuneration. Whereas the Ministry of Labour declare the wages above within the specific industry under the Wages Board Ordinance number 27 of 1941. The law of employment in Sri Lanka implied the minimum terms that include the minimum wages and holiday entitlement conditions.
Now I will explain the trade union in Sri Lanka. Trade unions help workers unite to negotiate with employers over wages, hours, benefits, and other working conditions. Workers and employers organizations in Sri Lanka plays an important role in maintaining their rights in the workplace. In Sri Lanka, there are 2,074 registered trade unions, which consist of 54.5% are in the public sector, 27.5% in public company, and 80% in private sector. International Trade Union Confederation have 4 trade unions, which are Ceylon Worker Congress, Sri Lanka Vidaha Sewaka Sagamaya, National Trade Union Federations, and National Workers Congress. Trade union in Sri Lanka consists of industrial union, craft unions, and also professional association. From the past, trade union in Sri Lanka managed the colonial plantation, which include tea, rubber, and also coconut crops. These workers were migrant bonded Tamil workers. Trade union in Sri Lanka always isolated, and they had to success in economic sector because of unfair wages and compensation. Although there was a political involvement of trade union in Sri Lanka, the issue of trade for political purpose is not regular, and unions have never been able to effect the political process. Features of union democracy are difficult to define in most unions, and the leadership is naturally being held by older veterans who are not ready to adapt with young activists. Next is collective bargaining of Sri Lanka. Collective bargaining is the process of negotiating the terms of employment between an employer and a group of workers, such as pay and working conditions. The first collective bargaining trade union, Sri Lanka Freedom General Worker, was signed in 1996 and entered between EFC and All Ceylon Trade Union Congress. Ceylon Mercantile Union (CMU) is a model for Sri Lanka and has indicated the efficacy of a no strict clause backed up by a system of voluntary arbitrations in conflict issues. The CMU continues to play an important role in the trade union movement, not only in regard to matters affecting its own members, but in regards to social, economic, and political issues affecting the working people. In addition, work and wages in Sri Lanka include the process of collective bargaining that contain large companies. Employers Federation of Ceylon (EFC) plays a very important role in terms of lobbying of labor reforms and changes in policy in the interest of employers in Sri Lanka. It is recognized by all trade and business chambers in Sri Lanka as the voice of business in relation to labor law and industrial relations in Sri Lanka. In addition, there are some matters that related to IR system of Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, many private organizations have complained about the dispute procedure, and this will bring negative impact towards performance of employees and employers. There are some employers do not agree to claim check-off, which means deduction of unions due from pay sheet, which is a major benefit to a union, unless the union decided to agree to a dispute settlement procedure. So, EPC had increased the effectiveness of collective agreements dispute settlement processes, and in some cases, strikes on matters covered by the agreement are absolutely prohibited during the validity of agreement. Second is disciplinary termination in Sri Lanka, result in workers looking for rectification from labor tribunals within 3 months of their terminations. The employees also have the right of requesting conciliations from Labor Department. If the issue is unable to resolve, it will bring to the Minister of Labour that should refer the dispute to compulsory arbitration within terms of Industrial Dispute Act. Based on diagram, the total number of labor force in 2019 was reported at 8,92,237, and for table show the estimated economically active population is about 8.4 million in 2018, of which 65.1% are males and 34.9% are females. This can show that male participation to the labor force is always higher than females. The graph of the size shows the net migrations and natural increase in Sri Lanka. As according to the graph, it shows a fluctuation since 2007, but since 2015, the net migration rate continued to increase, and at 2017, the net migrations had increased to 49,789. The above pie chart and table show the nationalities and employees in Sri Lanka for years 2016. Out of 100% of the total workforce, 39.7% are Sri Lankans, which are the domestic employees, and 0.3% are non-Sri Lankans, which are the foreign employees.
6.1 Employment of domestic workers and foreign workers in Sri Lanka. Okay, The domestic workers in Sri Lanka was not included in EPF Act, the Employees Trust Fund Act number 46 of 1980, and it will never have applied to the domestic workers. The employment in Sri Lanka was not distinguished between foreign or local employees as they apply equally. Domestic workers in Sri Lanka are entitled to a tax-free allowance. For foreign workers, they must obtain work permit from the Department of Immigration and Immigration. It was employers' obligation to obtain work permit for their foreign workers in order to ensure their foreign workers engaged in their employment have the requisite work permit in force. The work permit only valid for a period of 1 year. So if the foreign worker want to extend beyond the 1 year period, so they need to obtain new letter of recommendation. The person can be imprisonment for a period not less than 2 years and not more than 5 years if the foreign workers did not obey the Employment Act. And foreign workers in Sri Lanka also are taxed on their Sri Lanka source income starting from January 1, 2020 until March 31, 2020, as they are not entitled to a tax-free allowance.
And now I would like to explain about the sector of employment and its determinant of the employment pattern. And in Sri Lanka, there are three main sectors of employment, which are agricultural sector, industry sector, and service sector. The percentage of the total employment in Sri Lanka was 28.26% as according to the World Bank in the 2019. And there is a survey stated that there is a fluctuation in the percentage of the employee involving in the major industry groups. According to the graph in this slide, I would like to highlight an obvious changes, which is in 2004, the percentage distribution of the employee for agriculture is 33%, and in service sector is 42.1%, whereas in 2018, the percentage distribution of the employee in the agriculture sector decreased to 25.5%, and the service sector has increased to 46.6%. And this shows that service sector has shown the dominance in the Sri Lanka, and it plays an important role in Sri Lanka economy. The main reason for it is due to the technology trend. As according to the Department of Census and Statistics 2018, there was a rapid growth in service sector, especially in the IT business field. And the other reason is due to the job security and socio-economic security that caused the employment pattern to change. At first, most of the residents in Sri Lanka was involving in agriculture sector, but due to there is no formal working hour and also public holiday, as there is seasonal work for this sector, thus the agriculture employment was combined with informal sector employment in order to fulfill the demand and supply. Next, I would like to explain the government agency handling of the domestic worker and foreign worker. And in Sri Lanka has set up a Ministry of Skill Development, Employment and Labour Relations in order to contribute toward the socio-economic development. There are few departments under this ministry, such as Department of Labour, that established to handling all the industry dispute, promote EPF, enforce law to the women, children and young persons under the employment. Also, there is a Department of Manpower and Employment that established to produce professionals for the development of the human resource. Furthermore, Office of the Commissioner for Workmen Compensation is also established to obtain compensation for the employee who injured during work. Last is the Foreign Relations Division, which in charge of the obligation and responsibility of the Sri Lanka in foreign relations.
According to the National Minimum Wage of Worker Act, the minimum monthly wages for employees in Sri Lanka is 10,000 rupee, irrespective of industry. This has been taken effective since January 2016. Sri Lanka has two main laws relating to the payments of wages, which are the Wage Board Ordinance and the Shop and Office Employee Act (SOEA). This law stated that the maximum wage periods of Sri Lanka should not be more than 1 month, and the employer should pay the employees within 10 days after the completion of wage periods. The laws also stated that the employer are not allowed to make deduction on the employee's wages, except for those deductions authorized by law, such as income tax and EPF. However, the employer has the authority to deduct the employee's salary for their misconduct, and such fine should not be more than 5% of the employee's total salary. Regulation 17 of SOEA also stated that the employer should keep a written record of employees' salary for each payout, and such report should be kept for at least 4 years. According to the Employment of Women, Young Person and Children Act, employers are not allowed to force the female employees to work at night if they are unwilling to do so. However, if the employers need the female employees to work at night after 10, they must obtain an approval from the Labour Commissioner, and they are not allowed to have more than 10 night shifts per month. As for women who have been working from 6 in the morning until 6 at night, they are not allowed to work after 10 at night. If the women employees are required to work at night, they must be paid 1.5 times of their normal pay, and a woman warden should be appointed to look after the welfare of the female employees. However, these provisions do not apply to women who are holding the managerial position and women who are engaging in health and welfare services. In addition, females are not allowed to work underground unless they are holding the managerial positions. There are 3 laws that set the working hours of employees in Sri Lanka. SOEA is applicable to all employees who are working in a shop or office. According to SOEA, the employees are not allowed to work for more than 8 hours a day and 45 hours per week. The worker should also be given at least 30 minutes of rest after working for 4 continuous hours. However, a break will not be given to the employees who do not engage in work for more than 5 hours in a given day. Factory ordinance is applicable to employees who are doing manufacturing work, technical work, and manual work. Employees are not allowed to work for more than 9 hours a day and 48 hours a week. Wage Board Ordinance is applicable to other trades which are not mentioned just now. Employees are not allowed to work for more than 48 hours per week. If the employees are required to work for more than 48 hours per week, the subsequent hour will be considered as overtime. Only 12 hours of overtime is permitted every week. The employees working in Sri Lanka are entitled to casual leave, annual leave, sick leave, and maternity leave. Casual leave is used during emergency. For the first year of employment, the workers are entitled to 6 days of casual leave. From the second year onward, the workers are entitled to 7 days of casual leave every year. Furthermore, employees are not entitled to annual leave during the first year of employment. They are only entitled to paid annual leave during the second year of employment and onwards, which is 14 days per year. Besides, all the workers are entitled to 7 days of paid sick leave every year, provided that it must be certified by a doctor. For maternity leave, it is only entitled to women employees who have been working for the company for at least 150 days within 1 year, and they are entitled to 12 weeks of maternity leave. The Terminations of Employment of Workmen Act stated that employees who are terminated with non-disciplinary ground are entitled to the termination benefits based on their length of service. However, employees who are terminated because of disciplinary ground, breaches of retirement age as stated in a contract, and employees with less than 1 year in service are not applicable to the termination benefits. The table above shows the termination benefits of employees. If an employee is terminated during the completion of his 4 years of service, he is eligible to get 2.5 times of his normal monthly salary for the number of years in service. The employment law of Sri Lanka is applied equally to both foreign and domestic employees. All the foreign employees should obtain a work permit from the Department of Immigration and Immigration so that they can work in Sri Lanka. It is the employer's responsibility to help the foreign employees to obtain a work permit. In order to obtain a work permit, the employer should first make a request to the ministry by providing the supporting document to get a recommendation letter for the foreign employees. Once the recommendation letter is obtained, it should be forwarded to the Ministry of Internal Affairs along with the supporting document to seek for approval. When the recommendation letter has been approved, the foreign employees can enter to Sri Lanka with the entry clearance. When the foreign employees reach Sri Lanka, the foreign employees must make an application to the Departments of Immigration and Immigration to obtain a resident visa to enable them to stay and work in Sri Lanka. The applications of resident visa and tax for the work permit might cost around 20,000 rupee, and the entire application process might take about 3 months.
Minimum Retirement Age and Act in Sri Lanka. According to the Establishment Code of 1985, the minimum retirement age of the employees in public sector is 55 years old and need to provide relevant appointing authority of 3-month notice. The employee that decide to work past optional retirement age of 55 can continue to work until the employee turns 57 years old. But if the employee still wants to continue to working until 60 years old, they must get permission from the officer. Meanwhile, in private sector, the retirement age is between 55 and 60 years old because there is no law in Sri Lanka that set the minimum retirement age in private sector.
For the policies and act related to children and young labour, the employment of women, young persons, and children act prevents employment of children in any sector of services. According to the Factories Ordinance, normal working hours for workers between the age of 16 until 18 years must not be more than 12 hours per day. The Mines and Mineral Law No. 4 of 1973 prohibits young people less than 18 years old from working underground in any time. In terms of young labour in Sri Lanka, employment of young persons under the age of 18 is not allowed. The government in Sri Lanka has hazardous work activities list that contains the 51 occupations or working situations on which employee children under the age 18 years old is strictly not allowed. This includes slaughtering of animals, manufacture of pesticides, production, sales of explosives, fishing in deep waters, mining work, and transportation of passengers.
Next, I would like to explain about the policy to the Social Security Law. There are two types of programs, which are Provident Fund and Supplementary Fund, that cover for the old age, disability, and survival. And as according to the EPF Act, an employee need to contribute for 8% for their monthly earning, and employer need to contribute for 12% of the employee payroll. And there will be a lump sum of total employee and employee contribution plus the interest is paid when the employee retires, and Provident Fund will also pay when the employee total incapability to work, and survival benefit is also paid to the named beneficiary if the employee died before they retire. Whereas for the supplementary pensions, which is also known as trust fund, the fund member need to contribute at least 25 rupees per month, and the employer need to contribute 3% of the monthly payroll. Trust fund is qualified at age of 60 or older and retire, as where there will be a lump sum of total employee contributions with dividend and also interest is paid. Also, there are two types of programs, which are employer liability and maternity benefit for the sickness and maternity. The universal system, which is under employer liability system, will cover for all the residents in Sri Lanka, and free medical care will be provided from the government. And apart from that, employer liability system will also cover for the employed person that include contract worker if work injury. And if the person temporarily disability, there is a maximum of 5,500 rupee paid to him, and if permanent disability, there is a maximum of 550,000 rupee paid to him as according to how critical it is. And last, there is also a social assistance system, which is a family allowance for those low-income family if their family earning is below 1,005 rupee per month, and there is 1,000 to 3,000 per month will be paid depends on their family size. Last, I would like to highlight a welfare of worker policy as other suitable related matter regarding employment scenario, law and policy in Sri Lanka. Welfare of worker allows Sri Lanka to build an efficient and equitable pathway to the foreign worker as well. And for example, as according to the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment, stated that Sri Lanka provide welfare facility by offering a scheme in arranging loan for the migrant worker at low interest. Also, for those Sri Lanka employees that registered under Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment will be covered in the scheme of the benefit of the insurance coverage. And there is also other welfare such as the Sahana Housing Project for Disabled Migrant Worker, Child Protection Program, Welfare Assistance for the Needy Migrant Worker, and also the distribution school equipment for the children of the migrant worker.
Next is the similarities and differences between Malaysia and Sri Lanka in generally. Firstly is the population. The population in Sri Lanka is smaller than Malaysia, which is Sri Lanka is 21.9 million and Malaysia is 32.6 million. The capital city of the country. Sri Lanka capital city is Colombo and Malaysia is Kuala Lumpur, and the area of the country is also different because Malaysia has a big area includes Sabah and Sarawak that located at Borneo Island with area around 329,847 km square, and Sri Lanka an island with area around 65,610 km square. The next is the money currency and exchange of these two countries. The differences and development has impact on economy like money exchange. The development country like Malaysia has a balance in foreign money exchange which is convert from $1 to RM 4.20 cent, and Sri Lanka exchange is $1 to rupees Sri Lanka 187. This is differences is a big impact for the country in international trade because the income for the country like Sri Lanka can be lower than Malaysia. The differences in economic system in Sri Lanka is similar with nation because these two countries is focused at agriculture. For the main income for the GDP, the government politics system between Malaysia and Sri Lanka is also different because Sri Lanka is a president country system, but in Malaysia, the government system is a prime minister is a government leader. Lastly, it's different in religion. Malaysia and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, the main religion is Buddhist and the main religion in Malaysia is Muslims. In economic view, Malaysia is special because it's recognized as one of the halal hub country in the world. Next is the similarities and differences in industrial relation and employment law. Between Malaysia and Sri Lanka, firstly is the employment organization. In Malaysia, we have a Malaysian Employer Federation and Sri Lanka is the Employers Federation of Ceylon. This organization function is to monitor and solve the problem for employees and social issues in their own country. Next is the collective bargaining. It is same for the employers to bargain because the employee must be a member to bargain, and the difference is the Malaysian will bargain in process by the stage of organization, and Sri Lanka bargaining collective must not involve the strike to claim the right. In employment law, Malaysia used Employment Act 1955 and Sri Lanka the Industrial Dispute Act. And the content from these two employment law has its similarities and differences. For the example, the differences in retirement age. In Malaysia, the retirement age is 16 years old in average, and in Sri Lanka is 55 years old. It is because for Malaysian citizens, in 16 years old, they can contribute the energy because the healthcare and between these two countries are so different. In employment law also has a difference in the minimum wage for the employees. Malaysian employees can gain RM 1,200 per month, but in Sri Lanka, the employee just get Sri Lanka rupee 10,000. The unit is so big, but if it's converted to ringgit nation, it's around RM 230 only. Next is the similarities employment law. As we can see, the similarities is covering not only for these two countries, but has been around the world. As the example is employment of women. The similarities can be found in prohibition of night work, provision of underground work, and the maternity protection. The similarities also in work of hour. For the normal employees and children, the employment law states that the employee must not work more than 8 hours a day, but they can if the employer count it as overtime working. Lastly is the conclusion from Simon. We can gain the knowledge about the industrial relation and the employment law in Malaysia and Sri Lanka. Then we can know our right in employment. In addition, We can learn the process for beginning, then compare the economic between these two countries. That's all. Thank you for lending your ears. Assalamualaikum and goodbye everyone.